past 6 years travels and observation that came with. I open the floor to questions, observations, so please, Flores, now it's yours. Back to the topic. Yes?
It's not a question, it's actually like a statement. When you talk about policies, we're talking about something in political level, and politicians are always affected by manufacturers, by money. For example, when you talk about eating less meat, it's actually there's this possibility that the policies are not quite in line with this way of living. For example, as a kid, I always learned at school that eating red meat is really healthy, which is actually not true.
Yeah.
It could be something put in mind of people by politicians, by politics, and it's actually somehow a policy. Am I right? Or I'm just trying to say that policies are at the level of politics, and it's not maybe a good idea to talk about policies, but more about culture, more about education.
Hiroshi, sorry, for the benefit of the students which will ever look at your interesting talk, we are recording it. I do repeat, or I try to interpret at this stage your talk or your questions. So the question was related more about the influence of politics on changes, and the difference maybe if we should look at more at cultural understanding and work more on cultural education and changes rather than politics.
It's a very good observation, you're right. But let me just tell you a little bit about how they are connected. Yeah, okay, well, politicians, yeah, you're right. They control a lot of things. Policies versus laws. Policy is the sense of the direction, and policies lead to laws. Laws are for everyone in the country. Policies can change from time to time depending on what party is governing the country, what philosophy is there. It is not good, but this is how it happens. People, scientists, we all have we have to play our part to influence the policy. And one of the things actually UNU is trying to do, our research should be actually influencing the policy. So yeah, and then back to the cultural element. Yes, there is a cultural element, there is a religious element too in some countries too. It might not be very easy to penetrate. Now, sustainability has these three pillars, right? Sustainability is depending on environment, society, and economy. Socio-economy parts are the hard ones to actually handle. But we have to go for an approach that combines all of them. Science is not going to help us by itself. Science is not the only solution. We have to use all different avenues. So you're partly right, but I do not take it completely that we shouldn't challenge policies or the politics. We should. That's what I think about it. Because in some countries it has worked. And if you don't talk about it, if you don't try to influence it, nothing happens too. Or it will take like 25, 30 years extra. That's what I think. More avenues, use all possible avenues to tackle. Teaching kids is priority, yes. Maybe with new thinking you can do a big difference in the next generation.
But the problem is also the education is affected by policies and politics.
Yes and no,
so
not
like
anymore.
A circle.
These are not the times that I went to school and I had to refer to a book printed by the government. Things are changing. People have more avenues to look at material now. I mean, everything is related to everything. It's online. And look at all these social movements. They're supported by each other too. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, we have barriers, but the point is, rather than focusing more on the barriers, we can talk about the positive aspects and how we can use the avenues that are open to us to make it better. There is no perfect solution, yes.
Any other questions? Yes, please. again. I will repeat
You
the
speak
question.
Portuguese. Are you from Brazil?
From Mozambique.
Are you from Mozambique? Yeah, okay.
They are speaking Portuguese.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Good morning, my name is Pedro from Mozambique. I want to start by complimenting you for your good presentation.
Thank you.
Two things impressed me. The first thing, how you successfully depressed me with your presentation, but at the same time challenged me. I was depressed with things that you were saying because they're related.
Nothing personal. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I'm also impressed with how you see circular economy in everything. I was even thinking in the beginning that you would also see circular economy in this room.
Yeah.
And in fact, when you spoke about the Philips light in the airport, I realized that, yeah, you are seeing also circular economy in this room. But what I would like to say also is that that example of paper straws you gave us, it makes business sense because you have to drink fast, and if you stay long at the place, you order another drink. So it's...
You asking a question or you just making
No, I'm making a statement.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean-
challengeable.
Yeah, new technologies have to go through a transitional phase. I think we are in that phase. So maybe you're right. Yeah, it's probably will make something better. Like in the Rwanda example, they banned plastic bags, but then paper bag industry prospered, right? So maybe one will open the door for another. Yeah, you're right. But maybe they will come up with a better straw that you will have to use it for like 2 hours to finish your drink. Yeah. But thanks for the comment. Yeah. You were trying. You are still asking a question, or?
I still have one
Sure.
comment. Your first flight.
The metal?
Yes. The metal, particularly the boat. In my country, particularly in my city, the city where I come from, Beira, we used to have 3 or 4 boats along the beach. They were old boats from the master colony in Portugal.
Right.
They were old, and we never understood their importance. Suddenly, 10 years back, a new municipal government entered into power, and they started cutting those boats to reuse metals. I don't know whether it's a consequence or just a coincidence, but from that moment, we started having problems of erosions, or they increased the problems of erosions. The sand started being moving from one place to another by the waves.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I think you are trying to relate two different things. I can talk to you about the coastal dynamics. I know the answer to that, but I will not take time from this to explain. But the other part of the question is about why did they do it all of a sudden? Yeah, well, I mean, let's say you have nothing much in your fridge or your apartment. Then what you do, you look for anything in the other cabinets that you haven't looked at in a while. Same thing I said before, when you're pushed, when you feel the challenge, okay, we don't have many resources, we don't have a lot of money, then we look at other alternatives. So that's why you're seeing that all of a sudden they are selling the old ships for metal. In Bangladesh, I think there is one port entirely dedicated for that. They bring ships from other countries and they dismantle for metal. So this is going to be real because of the resource scarcity. When you hit that, there's no other option. You have to think about it. It's actually a good thing, right? I'm just commenting on your comment. It's not an answer. I saw another hand here, right?
I have a couple of, please, just a favor from my side, try to be concise with your question, because I have first to repeat the question for our virtual public, and then we can go on with the answer of erosion. Apologies, erosion, that if that might break the
it's
rhythm.
fine, yeah.
I think first one question from our director, and then I'll follow up with the next.
I have two questions, if I may.
Sure.
One, Hiroshan, is related to your observation about innovation. I want to add an observation. When I go to companies that explain, like a car manufacturer, for example, that explain the new technology, in general, they do it in a very different way compared to innovation they explain for recycling. So the innovation for the car in general is more focused on something cool and new and everyone wants it. And when it comes to the end of life, it's more, yeah, we also have to do this, we thought about possibilities. So how is your observation here, and how can we get this maybe more dynamic? One question, maybe you want to repeat this first,
Okay.
and then my
I
second
try my
question.
best.
Okay.
I think the question was more related about how differently innovation and recycling are perceived or explained in different contexts. There was the case of the car manufacturing, so innovation usually is related more to some innovative and positive feeling or approach. And when we come to the end life of a car, then we are more like, okay, we have to somehow make it circular. But yeah, this is the question. The first question is what is your thinking about that, and how can we make that improve? And the second question
Let me
we will
take
follow
one at a
later.
time. Let me take one at a time. Okay. Yeah, you're right. I can tell you about what I think. So you take a soda from the grocery store, you keep a 25 cents deposit, and it pushes us to go back and return it and get our money, right? You're doing it with bottles, soda cans. You're not doing it with real money. We are not doing it with cars. You're not doing it with anything larger, which is a mistake to me. It's the same concept what we saw in the old ship or the old turbine, because there is a material that is locked in one place and you're not able to access it. The material is not accessible to the market, the production cycle. So there has to be something we need to do to go away from the ownership that doesn't do anything good to the environment. So a couple of years ago, with two other professors, one from Italy, the other one from Switzerland, we developed a paper to explain this concept for metal. Rather than owning it, it needs to go on a banking system. You need to bring it back somehow. And then, if there is a policy to push you to do that, then you can make it work. If you don't have you don't feel responsible until there is something pushing you to do that. I mean, we are human, right? We like our freedom, so we are misusing our freedom. But it can, if it happens with the bottle deposit, why not? Why can't we use a similar concept in the same way? So SDG 12, probably we should be innovative. Also, I would like to add, I was not talking about general innovation. Innovation happens on a daily basis. The problem with our innovation is when we come up with a new product, we only focus on how to make it. The manufacturers very rarely tell you how to get rid of it at the end of the lifetime. They don't take, there's something called producer responsibility that we don't care. Producer should take the responsibility of the whole lifetime. We don't really, most governments do not have a rule or law to push to have that benefit. That's probably what we have to fix. Second question?
Second question is about maybe a sixth observation. You attended also many scientific conferences. What is your observation about research on circular economy? And maybe you can share a few thoughts, especially with our young guests, about possible fields of research, questions, and maybe PhD topics.
So the question is, what is up on the stage in the scientific flora about circular economy and potential avenues for future research?
That's a very interesting question. I can tell you a couple of things about it. If you look at this material, these slides, you can do 10 to 15 PhDs on these topics. You don't see them because I have not written them as research questions. Think through, you can do, I guarantee it's like 10, 15 PhDs, okay? You don't have to reinvent things. There are things around ourselves. There are some simple things that are not working. Question yourself why and how can we make it better. That's one thing. So, you know, you were asking about the number of conferences I attended and
Not about the number.
No, I know. I mean, not in that sense, but I've attended and talked in many circular economy or sustainability places. My experience is, okay, well, when they see the material, people get excited because they have not seen this in the same angle before. But there is a huge gap between what we see and what should happen. Research is not ready for that yet. That's one observation. The other observation is, we don't have to necessarily brand it as circular economy. You can see these examples, you know, I mean, if I didn't tell you they are related to circular economy, you might not take them as circular economy, maybe, I don't know, okay? Sustainability in general offers a lot of new things that we really have to research about. And they are, almost all of them are related to circular economy for the reasons we discussed before. And there is a third thing I need to, third or fourth, I don't know, I missed the count. There's one more thing I need to talk about. There is a gap between sciences and implementation. We are good at doing research because we are trained to do research. And then we are very good at publishing just because we have to publish. That is the problem, just because we have to publish. If you are a professor, if you don't publish, you lose your job. If you are a researcher, if you don't publish, you lose your job, right? So we have this push for that, but we are not doing it in a meaningful way. The real problem is we are not even doing research on the topics important to us. There is a gap. Most sciences are fine. We have enough solution. Okay, well, we have to do more research, but with the amount of research and inventions we have on the table, we can still do a lot of things that we are not doing now. What's more important is how to do it. We don't know that because research and publications, they stop at one level. At the doorstep of the university or the research organization, it stops. But implementation, we leave it up to another breed. It's the government officials, not my job. They should do it. No, we have to feel responsible too. You need to fill this gap, and it's much harder to fill this gap because it's not about numbers or sciences or engineering, it's about the socio-economic aspect. You need to understand the ground realities. So that's one last thing I want to add to that question.
Another questions, Nora, and then I come to you.
Yeah, Dresden, thank you. I really enjoyed your talk, especially because you simplify a complex process. And I think there are some points where science maybe tend to complicate things, which make the implementation harder. But the world is complex. So simplifying things maybe is a tool, but does not necessarily address the complexity of the problem. And I'm interested here in this scale. When you look at industrial agriculture, you said that 70% of the fresh water is used in agriculture, right? So now if I need to prioritize to solve this problem at a much bigger scale, so what would be your recommendation? Where should I intervene? What are the priorities?
So I repeat shortly, after the acknowledging for the interesting talk, especially for the vision of how to simplify a complex problem, Nora is asking whether okay, we are living in a complex world with a complex problematic, so how would you see then the problem addressed, a more systematic probably approach? And the case which was done was the agricultural industry, where the water abstraction for agricultural purposes is higher than 70% of.
Okay, well, thank you for your comment. First of all, about simplification, yeah, I do it on purpose because I was in the research and academia. I was a traditional professor for 8-9 years, and I understood my limitations to help people because it's mostly about what I said before, publications. If we don't talk to normal people, general people in a way they can understand, we're not doing our job. That's a fact. We're not here only to talk among ourselves as researchers. One of my teachers or mentors a long time ago said, if you don't know how to explain it to your grandma, you don't know your subject. Make it simple so people can understand it. And the real question is, what do we see? Okay, 70% of fresh water. Well, out of what we use today as water for our consumption, 70% goes into agricultural sector. Mostly fresh. Let's say 100% fresh, let's just assume. Yes, it's a big problem. Why? Because we are trying to go to Mars, but the way we handle our agriculture is still, well, we see new machinery, but we still do our agriculture in the same old-fashioned way. We don't need water. There are different technologies. I can give different options, like 1 or 2 examples. One is we are even talking about waterless or no water agriculture. You don't have to have necessarily the traditional fields with irrigation on a daily basis. You don't have to do that. So there are things that we can innovate. We can do to innovate and reduce water usage. And even if you go with traditional irrigation, there are techniques to control the amount of water you use, like drip irrigation versus flood irrigation. There are different ways. Might not be the best options because the impact will be really low. And the other thing is what we are good about, right? Sewer. Sewer might not be the answer to all problems you have in related to agricultural water, but safe use of wastewater in agriculture can be a solution to many water-stressed countries. You need to treat it. We never encourage people to use any raw wastewater. So treated wastewater is good enough to do agriculture, and plus if you do it at the right level, it gives extra nutrients too. Again, like my answer to the other question, we have to think about multiple ways. But agriculture is one area that we are so reluctant to change the way we do business. I don't know why, but there is technological advances. Machinery is new. There is new type of seeds. Everything is fine, but the fundamental model has not changed. That needs to change too.
Thank you, Ilusha. Back to your question.
Okay, hi, I'm Adriana from Brazil.
From Brazil, okay, hi.
So, I think circular economy today is broadly discussed considering the materials or natural resources management and therefore environmental dimension. So we saw the example from my country, and my question is if we pursue the circular economic model that waste is out of the flow, what happens with that informal sector? What kind of solutions they are coming up with, considering the social impacts of the circular economy model?
So shortly, so the perception, the question is more related to how, let's try to allow me if I make some mistake, please correct me. So tendentially the perception on circular economy so far, or the research that has been done, is mostly related to natural resource management. So what happened if we would take now out the part of the waste to place it back into the circle, what happens to the now so-called informal sector, that, what is your perception of how should we move toward the socioeconomic related aspect of the informal sector?
Just to understand it better, the second part I understand, what happens to the informal sector. The first part of the section, first part of your question, what is this
Just a
exactly?
comment, they say like it's broadly discussed the environmental dimension of the whole process, the social sector. So one kind of the impacts can be the informal sector.
Yeah, okay. Good, okay. So let me begin by saying what I said before. What's hard to handle is the socio-economic part, not engineering, not sciences. Socio-economic part. We as scientists, usually disregard that, we forget that, we find it convenient to disregard it. I'll never say to anyone that we should completely disregard the informal sector. No, they are actually doing good circular economy. They are practicing circular economy even though they don't know it. They are practicing it on a daily life. And if you do the numbers, in economic terms is in billion dollar business. Recycling, informal sector recycling is $1 billion. So removal is not the answer, but you can think of other models. It has happened in Brazil too. In some other examples around the world, governments or the municipalities have tried to absorb the informal sector labor force into some established programs. It didn't happen with this one because of the geographical problem, because the old dump site was very close to the city, and those who do recycling, they don't have cars, they're poor people, so it was very close to their neighborhoods. New landfill, when they designed the new landfill, they took it 35 kilometers away from the city, and most of them didn't have a way to go there, and even if they go there, it's prohibited, and it's a better level landfill, so it doesn't happen that way. But the government, or whoever is proposing the solution, should have a plan to absorb them into the system. For an example, they can actually hire them as laborers or some experts, because these people, even though they might not have a college education, they know what they do, they know what to look for. This knowledge is important. Some countries have benefited from that. I have a few examples. If you're interested, I can share them later. But it's not very uncommon to design a new solution around that by absorbing the labor force. Your question brings me to another example. Most of you are young. I remember having only a radio, not even a TV. And we used to have radio repair shops. Where are they now? Do you see radio repair shops? Even in the United States. When I moved to the States, I saw a chain of shops called Radio Shack. Not doing anything related to radio, but it was called Radio Shack because culturally it was the same concept. As a kid, radio was the only thing. When I was very small, like first grader, radio was the only thing we had. We didn't have TV, and then TV came. Radio shops evolved into repairing TVs. Oh, you don't see TV repair shops too now. What are they doing now? They repair phones. It evolves. Same thing, same answer. It doesn't have to die. This workforce, they have to be open enough to learn new things and get into the next level of technology too. Same thing, it's a joint effort. They cannot just say, no, I just want to go to this landfill because this is where I go. That's not fair, right? It has to be both ways. I hope it helps, yeah? Okay.
Other questions? I see 1, 2, 3 hands up. In terms of who has been fast first, please.
Very good presentation. I am Johnny Morgan from Jamaica. And I understood your point about the unbalanced perceptions. And the example that came to mind is the paper straws and the paper bags. So in Jamaica as well, in 2018, we 2019 January, we banned single-use plastic bags and plastic straws. So now there's a shift to paper bags and paper straws. But with the recycling of paper being so low, is it that we're moving to another concept that is really bad for the environment in terms of paper?
Example from Jamaica, if I'm correct. So also in Jamaica was banned the use of plastic bags and plastic straw, and now the new economy is towards maybe paper bags and paper straw. Do you foresee any problem then in the new wave of waste coming up?
Yes and no. That's a very interesting question. You're from an island. I was born and raised in an island, to Sri Lanka. Islands have actually a problem of dealing with more plastics. Singapore, Sri Lanka, a few other islands, and Jamaica too. And there they're actually thinking about transitioning to paper bags. So what I told a couple of minutes ago, sustainability is not for free. Sustainability has a cost. What we have to do is to identify when we spend money and go with a different solution, it should bring some benefits, at least in one sector, at least environment, or in other sectors, if not a combination. So there is an opportunity cost always, but from the sustainability point of view, paper is something at least you can recycle. Not all paper is qualified to be recycled, you know that, right? But at least you can have some hope that it can be recycled, and if not, it can still degrade. Plastic does not give you the same options with the kind of technology we have, with the plastics we have not. There is some expensive type of plastics that will degrade in a landfill, but it's not really commercially available in mass scale. There is something every community has to do to understand what they want to do. Sustainability will give you an array of options. You don't have to do all of them. You just have to pick what works for your community, your culture, your country. So, just for fun, I'll tell you something happened in Ghana when I talked about. I had some of these examples in my slide set, and I talked about Pakistan too, I think. One Ghanaian professor stood up and he was mad. It's very important in our culture to eat more than one dish. So, I mean, he took it in a different way, and he thought, I'm asking them just to do it in their country too. So I gave the same answer. No, sustainability is not a law. It's all about the different options you have. It's your responsibility to take it in a way that you can fit to your society. So all examples are not going to help all of us. But there is one or two things we can learn from each other.
Next
two more,
questions? Yes?
I want to appreciate the professor for his wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
My name is Amama from Nigeria. In the course of your presentation, you talked about the e-waste in Ghana. Now, Nigeria too, we're basically an importer country. We do mainly importation of this e-waste. So we have a similar problem with Ghana. So my question now is, for a country like Nigeria, where we really have a problem of e-waste management, we have two formal recyclers. We equally have informal recyclers. So, Prof, what's your take on trying to now formalize the informal sector? Because in our EPR program, which is the Extended Producer Responsibility Program, we have each stakeholders doing one thing or the other. Now for the informal sector, we can't really have a data for them. So what's your take on trying to formalize the informal sector?
Okay,
So our colleagues from Nigeria she's explaining basically that Nigeria is facing similar problem than Ghana related to the e-waste, and she would like to know what is your opinion of the way to formalize the informal sector, that it's quite relevant then in Nigeria if we want to move then into more sustainable circular economy debate.
It's really, I mean, I have to be honest with you, I don't have a magical answer, but I can give some context and can maybe answer around the question. Everything I said about the other question about the informal sector is true about this informal sector too. There are ways we can absorb them into the proper job sector. There are ways and there are examples we can do that. Yeah? But on the top of that, what challenges us is this element about e-waste, the E part of it, because it is hazardous, it can be dangerous. So that is something you cannot easily solve because these companies are actually always trying to find loopholes. Until you close the loopholes, it's not easy to solve. But just as an idea, you might think this is a silly example. Cannabis. Talking about sustainability, and all of a sudden now I want to get high. Cannabis is an example. In some countries, cannabis, governments decided to make cannabis legal. Why? Well, in a way, tax, yeah, okay, you can actually legally earn money. Government earns money when cannabis is legal, but actually, the benefits by making it legal is much better than keeping it illegal and sending people to prisons. Overall cost. So rather than banning people working in the e-waste industry, actually it can be formalized. The only problem is when it happens, if you're getting a shipment from a European or any other Western country, it needs to happen in a legal way with legal responsibility. This is the problem because most developing countries do not have, first, policies or laws. Second, even if they had them, there's no enforcement or there's no mechanism to enforce it. These things need to be fixed. So one example, China. China used to be the biggest intaker of plastics until 2 years ago. They said, no, go to hell, we will not take your plastics anymore. Now they take plastics, it's down to 1%, they say, we only take clean plastics. It has to pass through our system. If you bring in clean, categorized plastic, we will still take it. It's possible, but China became powerful and they implemented the system to handle it. It's a large country, but they still can do it. But not all developing countries. So there are some stages you have to pass through. Rwanda, for an example, as a developing country, 11 years ago, they were brave enough to introduce it. It was not smooth. There were a lot of plastic smuggling from Kenya to Rwanda back then, Kenya and other countries in the region. But they didn't give up. There are ways to do it. I'm sorry I don't have a magical answer, but I think this context will give some idea about it. Yeah?
Let's see, one more question. Yes?
So I'm Rafael from the Philippines.
Hi.
I appreciate you emphasizing on the concept of repairing and redesign. I think that's what's missing in this closing the loop cycle. But speaking of the waste trade and the green pens in China, like limiting the plastics going in, a lot of technologies are famous, especially in Asia, to address this waste management. I'd like to get your insight in terms of, do you think waste to energy technologies, excluding biogas, so I'm talking about incinerators, plasma arc, gasification, could help us achieve circular economy?
Okay, this was so colleague from Philippines, correct? So what is your opinion? Is there any technology use like incineration and other waste to energy technologies that might help us besides biogas on achieving circular economy and sustainability?
Okay. Very interesting question. My answer will be in few different layers. One thing I want to re-emphasize is sustainability is not for free, and then the second thing I said before was it's an array. It presents you an array of options. It's your responsibility to pick the right one for your community, for your problems. Let me just talk about, I'll come back to the waste to energy, let me take an example with landfills. I'll tell you about 3 countries using landfills in 3 different ways. United States, where I come from, Germany, where I live now, Japan, I visited Japan once. These 3 countries, from Singapore and Japan, they are in the same boat. When I explain, you will understand. In the United States, land is not a big issue. There's plenty of land, so there's no push to reinvent or do anything fancy about landfills. Most of it goes to a landfill, okay? That's not good. But because they are not challenged with resource problem, right? So they do it that way. Germany, in 2005, they passed a law that anything biodegradable shouldn't be in a landfill. So it is somewhat strictly followed now. So there are landfills, but it's only for, in general, let's say, non-biodegradable material. Same landfill concept is practiced in a different way in Germany. Singapore, I'm looking at you, Singapore or Japan, you're from Japan, there are landfills, but for what? To put ash. You burn the whole thing, it goes to the landfill. There are landfills in both countries. Most landfills are in, Singapore has only one, right? It's in the sea, and Japan has many, mostly in the sea. There are landfills, but only taking ash because you burn it. You have to take the country context, economic status, and all other things into account before giving a solution. To me, as an engineer, landfills and incinerators are the best engineering solutions to handle waste problem. Handle waste problem, I didn't say anything about sustainability. It handles the waste problem in an efficient way. If you're in a large city, you don't have much time, sure, send it to the landfill or burn it, fine. Is it sustainable? No. Both options are not sustainable. Not at all. But when you consider all other aspects, economies, socio-economic aspect, everything, sometimes you're pushed to take one of these options. Now, specifically about incineration. Incineration is a sustainable option if you control the intake, if you control what you burn. If you burn in any plastics or any derivatives of fossil fuels, you're not doing it right, it's not sustainable. But if you burn in other things, there is a theory about it that there's a carbon balance. For an example, what you took from crops, if you burn it, the carbon dioxide goes back in the carbon cycle in a short period of time, so it gets back into the system. But if you burn fossil fuel, plastic stuff in an incinerator, no, you're not doing it right. So it's all relative. And it's really easy for someone to judge another community, another country, but they all have their reasons to do that too. But we can try to do it better by controlling. I don't know if really answered your question, but I think maybe I'd answer around the question.
Yeah, I think there's a conflict in this circular economy thing in relation to the incinerator, because incinerators, as we know, requires a certain tonnage to be burned.
Yeah.
And it promotes extraction of more resources rather than conserving. And I think the EU directive also has a contradictory in terms of their law in regards to their incentivizing more of the capturing rather than the conservation. And like developing countries, especially in Asia, so I'm speaking in behalf of my country.
Right.
So we cannot afford this kind of technologies, unlike Japan, Singapore, and of course emission control. And with all these lab tests are very expensive, and even Germany, it takes a lot of times in a day to monitor this kind of emissions. So don't you think it's about time we get the attention of the manufacturers to redesign all these products which are single-use or disposables? Because, as you said, it's been a long time that the communities and the governments are the one who's handling the waste after the manufacturers produce it.
Yeah, in your one question, I see about 25 questions. It's, it's great. I'm glad you're thinking in this way. It's not easy to answer this question in 1 or 2 sentences. But there is a reason why I never talked about any landfills or any incinerators in my examples. I don't want to. They're not sustainable. But if you're in a large city, well, let's say Manila, how big is Manila? How many millions?
10 million.
10 million. It's a mega city, 10 million, no anything more than that. Think about the municipality having a headache to take care of the tons of waste they get into the stream every day. What do? As a municipality, you need to find a temporary solution. So I don't discard any of the solutions, but incineration and landfills are the design engineering solutions that will guarantee the answer. They will be here for quite some time. However, I'm already seeing one of the technologies is being rejected in Europe now. Incinerators are not popular now because, you know why? Incineration became popular 20-30 years ago around Europe. It's not popular anymore because they don't have enough waste to burn. Why? Because the other streams of recycling is doing better now. So the incinerators are not receiving enough waste to burn. Think about that. That's natural evolution. People with education and thinking, they changed the way they practice things, and it actually made an impact, adverse impact on burning, incineration. It happened in a better way. No one is pushing each other. So you have to take all this into account. Sometimes it helps because it gives you a quick solution to a larger city with 30 million people. But it's not sustainable. So at the same time, you have to look for a long-term and sustainable alternatives. I hope it helps.
Do we have any other questions from the floor? If not, I might want to ask one.
Sure.
Maybe then I let you all go for lunch.
You waited for 4 years to ask me this question. You've been sitting right in front of me for 4 years.
You better listen to my question, then you will realize why.
Now it's a chance.
No, I mean, you talk about sustainable production and consumption and importance of this SDG. So how do you see FLORES contributing to that, if at all, and if there is an avenue? Because we started working more on natural resource management, and now we are considering also the other parts. So how do you see that into the future?
Okay, one clarification.
So I wanted to avoid extra job. That's why I asked for
the
you
other
after.
parts. You said other parts. Can you please specify?
So sustainable resource management, and then now we go to sustainable consumption and production in the site. So how would you see that in FLORES, or where could we contribute to?
All right, I admit I had to admit you trapped me because it's something I didn't want to talk about, but I honestly talk about my expression. I'm on tape, right? This is my observation. These are based on my observation. I'm talking about my opinion does not necessarily represent UN or UNU or United Nations University FLORES. But I have to be honest with you. I was in college when environmental engineering became very popular. I did civil engineering. Civil engineering departments in most universities renamed their departments and they called them civil and environmental engineering, just to get the attention. Because it was good to be associated with the environment. Same thing happened with sustainability 5 years after. We all loved the word sustainability. It became part of curriculum, which I really appreciate. And even the most pathetic business practices are using the same word to say we are doing much sustainable job than before. Yeah, of course, relatively. These buzzwords, they come and go. It's up to us, the scientific community, to give it meaningful life. It's somewhat, it happened okay with sustainability. Sustainability is still understood in a better way than the other concepts or other words, buzzwords we saw later. I'm not picking on, okay, well, I do have to address Nexus approach, Nexus thinking. I want to call it Nexus thinking. And when I talk about it, I'm actually referencing to the water, energy, and food nexus, because I really believe in the importance of these prior. They are important. Even in my movie example, when he is really down to his last option to survive, these are the only three things he needs for survival. These are very basic things. So there are so many things you can do, but life is short, so you have to pick the right ones to make a contribution. Whatever it is, what I think is sustainability stays in the backdrop on everything we do, but there are different ways to go there. Like circular economy is not a magic answer, but circular economy will help us to achieve sustainability in a better way, in a faster way, in a meaningful way. They are all related to each other. And where is Nexus in this? Well, I mean, circular economy is not limited to food, energy, or water. Circular economy is about the whole material cycle. It flows. But if you focus on these three things that are really important to the survival of humanity, water, food, and energy, sure, it's very meaningful to do something in the Nexus area. To me, there is very less sense to create another Nexus called water, soil, and waste Nexus. Okay, I'm being honest here. I was here for 6 years. What we should do is, going back to Mark Watney's example, in the large picture of the real Nexus concept, water, food, energy, waste is everywhere. You don't need a second Nexus to define it. Waste is the binding material among all these things. If you put the pieces in the right place, actually you're talking about the same thing. So buzzwords sometimes can distract you. So it doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the day, we are all trying to contribute to the sustainability. The issue is when you're picking the wrong channel, or when you preoccupy yourself with different buzzwords or different terminology, you fight about different terminology or things like that, it makes the whole process a bit retarded, ineffective. Because we all walk to the same destination. It's about how much time you spend to get there. That's my honest opinion.
Thank you.
I hope it's good enough.
It is. So if there are no other questions, I give a last chance. Yeah, there is one. Okay, very quick one. We have 5 minutes.
I'm from Vietnam. My question is because you had the voice management UNU-FLORES, so the focus of your presentation was mostly about the aim of the value change. I want to pick up a different side of the SCP, like on the consumption side, for example, because to reduce waste, we have to do both, like to reduce consumption and then to return or try to extract possible reuse of waste. But from the consumption perspective, is it psychologically possible or feasible to ask people or population from European countries which suffer from poverty for a long time, and now they manage to get out of poverty and start to enjoy the consumption? Like, is it possible to ask them to reduce this?
Okay. Allow me my interpretation. So is it, we are talking about now consumption, sustainable consumption, and the question relates to middle and low income countries that have now moved to like better life, and we are talking about now sustainability also as reduction of consumption. Is it ethical to ask developing countries that are now starting enjoying their benefit to reduce their own consumption for the overall benefit of all nations?
Thank you. Yeah, that's another interesting question. I mean, you had to use your brain to design solutions, but before you implement them, you need to check with your heart. So there is a very sensitive element in it. This is what I have to say. India and China, the middle class is growing heavily. There will be very high demand for their consumption. The middle class is growing, they need cars. All of them want to drive, all of them want to eat more meat. It should be their right, yes. No one should force any solution upon other people. I think it has to be an evolutionary process. It needs to go through education and realization. Coal, for an example. European countries and the United States and Canada, they use coal for a long time. Now they are telling everybody else not to do it. Is it good? Is it right? Yeah, because they learned it was bad. So now they are telling everybody else, China and India and other countries, to stop it. But people sometimes take it in an arrogant way. Yeah, okay, well, you used it. Now you're telling me not to use it? Same logic. Well, we learned some lessons. And it's probably better we benefit from that. But also at the same time, we have to allow those countries to go through this and realize it by themselves. It takes time. And but there is one good thing about this cycle. So two things we have to face, real things. We can never eliminate waste. If anybody is talking about zero waste, I'm telling you right now, it's a lie. It will never happen. It's good to have a dream concept because it will drive you to do a better job. But zero waste is a big lie. Zero waste it doesn't exist. There will be some waste always. Okay. Here, there will be some waste. We are just trying to minimize it. Even if you put back, let's say. Okay, well, hypothetically, let's say even if you put back 100% of the material back in the system, which is not going to happen, but if you put back 100%, population growth and this growth in or changes in our consumption, like the middle class of China and India, will need us to produce more in here. How do we address that? Are we going to take more? Because, okay, well, now you're doing a good job here, but we still have to take more to address the increase in population and increase in the demand because of the consumption pattern. No. The answer, well, I mean, in a way, yes, but the answer depends on how we innovate ourselves with the production. Less water-oriented production and less material consumption. This all has to go through some sort of an evolutionary process, but education can help us get there faster. There's no magic solution.
Okay, I'm sure that Hiroshima will be happy to answer more of your questions after we close the session. So with this, I would like to thank you all for your participation and interesting questions.